Chapter 41. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Hod glanced at Gwen clinging to him, then looked up at Wanda's jealous face. Hey, Gwen, easy there. That he could practically feel Wanda wanting to rip him apart. Her expression was like a wolf watching its meal get snatched away, but, truth be told, he was enjoying Gwen's embrace. Having her pressed against him like that was surprisingly refreshing. He was starting to understand what all the fuss was about. Ahem, finally, Hod cleared his throat awkwardly and patted Gwen's thigh. Okay, Ghost Spider, you can let go now. And he couldn't help but notice the girl's, assets. It almost made him want to pull out his weapon. He quickly squashed that thought, knowing how furious Wanda would be. Oh. Sorry. I got a little carried away. Gwen released him quickly. As she slid down, she bumped into something rather prominent, wow, she thought. Even someone with powers like his carries a gun. She couldn't help but wonder why someone so powerful would be so prepared, but she'd been so excited, she'd forgotten it was Gwen who knew Hod, not Ghost Spider. Okay, Tony's on his way to handle things. Wanda, barely containing her anger, walked over to Hod, her voice tight. She could also sense that Gwen had some interesting feelings for Hod. Even though Hod hadn't initiated the hug, she was still consumed with jealousy. Even in her short sentence, Hod could feel the undercurrent of her jealousy. Hey, Witch, looks like the media's here to interview you. Hod noticed the reporters in the distance and quickly changed the subject. He didn't want Wanda to dwell on that particular topic. He knew Wanda could pick up on his own complicated feelings. But I was just here to watch. Wanda was taken aback. An interview would just feel wrong. Besides, I'm not a fan of the spotlight, and the Avengers could use some good press. Hod shook his head. The last incident had slightly improved their image. But it wasn't enough. Letting Wanda take the credit this time would be a good move. Besides, he'd already gotten his reward from the system. Dealing with those pesky reporters was a job best left to Wanda. Well. Wanda saw the genuine look on Hod's face and finally nodded. Hod was right. The Avengers needed some positive attention. Then Ghost Spider and I will head out. Hod turned to Gwen, a sly smile playing on his lips. Wanda could only nod reluctantly and stay to face the music. As soon as the two were gone, a swarm of reporters descended on Wanda. Scarlet Witch, did you take down the monster all by yourself? You're a true New York hero. They say it was over 10 feet tall. Is that true? You didn't back down, even facing something that terrifying. Was it for the people? Were you seriously injured in the fight, that because the reporters had been too afraid to approach until the monster disappeared, that they had no idea what had actually happened? Seeing only Wanda, they naturally assumed she was responsible for everything. Wanda wasn't a good liar. She looked like she wanted to say something but couldn't. Remembering what Hod said, she just forced a stiff smile and nodded. The reporters' questions were overwhelming. Luckily, Tony and Steve arrived just in time to chase the reporters away. They set up a security perimeter. Wanda, are you okay? Steve, shield in hand, approached Wanda, looking concerned. Judging by the scene, it must have been a tough fight. Even the ground around them was a wreck. The whole street was nearly destroyed. I'm fine. I'm not hurt. Wanda pursed her lips and shook her head. She'd watched the whole fight, and Hod had handled it all. You're getting stronger every day. Steve looked around and couldn't help but be impressed. Even an angry Hulk probably couldn't do this much damage. Everywhere you looked was just devastation. I didn't kill the monster. Wanda took a deep breath and shook her head, denying it. Even though Hod wanted her to take the credit, she didn't want to lie to her friend. And honestly, she would have struggled to even deal with that monster. The fire alone would have been too much. Who did, then? Steve looked confused. He hadn't realized anyone else was involved. It was a mysterious person. Wanda just shook her head awkwardly. She didn't know how to explain Hod's existence. Enough, Wanda. Tony, who had just finished dealing with the media, came over and looked at Wanda intently, opening his mouth as if to say something, but then stopping. In the end, he looked away, forcing himself to stay silent. He knew Wanda wasn't lying. This mysterious person had always been a puzzle he wanted to solve. He helped Wanda control her magic, and now he'd stepped up to save the day. The more that happened, the more confusing his identity became. He wanted to ask, but what Hod had said earlier echoed in his mind. It was better to wait for her to tell him in her own time. Scarlet Witch. Scarlet Witch. Scarlet Witch. Wanda looked back, confused, and saw a large group of people holding banners and chanting Scarlet Witch. Outside the security perimeter. Those are all your fans. Steve saw her puzzled expression and said with a smile, go sign some autographs and take some pictures. Okay. Wanda nodded and smiled as she walked over to greet the crowd, but she didn't notice the pair of strange blue eyes staring at her from the back of the crowd. Those eyes were filled with greedy desire. Chaos magic really is inside her. The figure in the crowd was Agatha. Her eyes fell on the dust that the barbarians had turned into within the security perimeter. She couldn't help but smile, her whole body trembling with excitement. And there's even the power of the Phoenix. What an opportunity the gods have given me. Chaos magic and the power of the Phoenix, all in one place. Agatha's eyes turned cold. She wanted them both. P.S. Brothers, if you think it's good, please give the author some free flowers. I will be very grateful. If one person gives me flowers, no matter how many flowers I give, I will add another chapter. Chapter 42. You are listening at novelfull.audio. New York, Queens. The huge clock on the towering clock tower ticked away. From the top floor, the entire New York skyline spread out below. People strolled the streets, and as the sun dipped, car headlights began to blaze, looking like glowing ribbons from above. The orange light bathed the city, painting a beautiful scene. At the clock tower's peak, Hood and Gwen sat comfortably on the edge, gazing at the distant view. Since Hood left Manhattan, Gwen had brought him here. You're a real sucker for a good view, Hood said, propping himself up with his hands and tilting his head to look at Ghost Spider. He'd noticed Gwen had a thing for these scenic spots. Yeah, Gwen agreed, nodding slightly, a lazy smile playing on her lips. She used to enjoy these views alone, but now she had someone she could trust to share them with. It made her feel happy and content. Never get tired of the Queen's skyline, huh? Hood smiled, turning his gaze back to the distance. It's not just the view, Gwen said, taking off her mask, her cheeks flushing slightly. It's because you're here. Saying it felt like a confession, but it was the truth. Someone's learning to flirt, little Gwen, Hood teased, gently pinching her cheek. Gwen leaned in, enjoying his touch. The sandalwood scent of his cologne made the corners of her mouth curl. She didn't know how Hood felt, but she knew she was falling for him. Hey, ever seen New York upside down? Gwen suddenly jumped up, stretching, and looked at Hood with a playful glint in her eyes. Upside down New York? Hood looked puzzled. Just flip the view. Duh. Gwen shot a web and hung upside down from the roof, her golden hair cascading down, shining in the sunset. Wanna try it with me? She asked, grinning. Sure. Hood didn't hang upside down, instead he clasped his hands together. Instantly, New York's skyline flipped. Gwen stared, speechless. What is this? She exclaimed, scrambling back to his side, her eyes wide. She'd never seen anything like it. It felt bizarre, like the world had turned upside down. But she knew it was only affecting her senses. Just a little magic trick, Hood said, smiling and shaking his head, taking her hand and leading her back to the edge. He'd simply altered their perception of the world with magic, not created a mirror dimension. It was a first for him, too. Seeing New York this way was wild, like heaven and earth had switched places. He glanced at Gwen. The view was great, but she was even better. The sunset framed her small figure, her face pale against the light, her brows like stars. Her golden hair danced in the breeze. He couldn't look away. Gwen caught his gaze and blushed. Stop staring, she said, look at the view. Her spider sense buzzed with his attention, her heart thumped. Beautiful scenery deserves a beautiful woman, Hood said softly. doesn't the upside-down world feel weird? Gwen asked, trying to change the subject, her cheeks burning. Still, the reversed scene gave her a new sensation. Especially with Hood sitting nearby, her heart sped up. A little. Like seeing a whole new world. Hood nodded. He'd never considered seeing the world from this angle. His dark eyes turned back to the horizon. Gwen watched him carefully. The city lights painted angles and shadows on his face, making him look even more attractive. Is this the person I love? She wondered. The more she looked at him, the more he seemed like a black hole, drawing her in. Hood. She said suddenly, I feel dizzy. I think I've got a fever. What? Hood was taken aback. How could Gwen suddenly get a fever? She was Ghost Spider, she was tougher than that. He reached out to touch her forehead. The moment his warm hand made contact, Gwen's face flushed, and she broke out in goosebumps. You are such an idiot. Gwen mumbled softly. But, your forehead is a little. Hood started to say, but Gwen cut him off. Change the way, she whispered, her ears turning red. What did you say? Hood didn't understand. He knew something was off with Gwen. The next thing he knew, she was in his arms. Had he just been kissed? And by the seemingly innocent Gwen. Chapter 43. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The author is updating this chapter to make it even better. Please check back in 24 hours for the revised version. In the meantime, feel free to read the next chapter. VIP subscribers won't be charged again to view the updated chapter. If you haven't subscribed, there's no charge this time either. Chapter 44. You are listening at novelfull.audio. When Hood glanced over at Wanda, he was taken aback. Her smile had completely stiffened. He hadn't even made his move, and he'd already been caught red-handed. Wanda's face screamed that she knew someone was upstairs, and it was a woman. He really hadn't expected Gwen to call at the worst possible moment. He'd been planning to cook up some excuse to get Wanda out of there, but now that was clearly a no-go. Crunch, star, her smile was now laced with fury, and he could practically hear her grinding her teeth. She'd also noticed his soaking wet clothes. What she had heard clearly implied he was in the shower. The fact that Hood was also in the bathroom now made her think of something. Could this be? Honey, it sounds like you have a girl calling you upstairs. Wanda took a deep breath, meeting his eyes with forced composure. Still, the shopping bag she had with her suggested the dress inside wasn't for her. Hood didn't know when she'd be over, and she'd only come tonight because she missed him, but she never imagined walking into this. Betrayal, anger, hurt, they all came crashing down on her. She was confused and didn't know what to do. She even wondered if she'd misheard. Really? Hood stammered, it must be the maid. Right then, his brain felt like mush. He couldn't think straight. It wasn't that he was slow on the uptake, but the vibes he got from Wanda and Gwen were unlike anything he'd felt with other girls. Before Wanda, he'd been in similar situations countless times and never felt a thing, but now, he was genuinely panicking. You gave the staff the day off, remember? There are no servants here tonight. Wanda's body trembled slightly, her eyes filling with pain and beginning to redden. She'd suspected it, but didn't want to believe it. She'd hoped Hood would come up with some excuse to explain it all away, but his story was so lame, she couldn't fool herself even if she wanted to. Her heart ached. She was falling for him, and this was happening. Wanda. Hood reached for her hand, wanting to explain, but Wanda pulled away. She grabbed the bag of clothes and hurried upstairs. Since she couldn't lie to herself anymore, she had to see it with her own eyes, because she didn't know what she should do. One thought consumed her. Who was it? Who could be better than her? Hold on, slow down. Hood gritted his teeth, forcing a smile, and hurried after her. He could feel the storm brewing inside Wanda, like a keg of dynamite about to blow. He wasn't even sure she wouldn't rip Gwen apart the second she saw her. He knew how powerful Wanda could be when she was angry. Even though nothing had technically happened, Gwen was definitely taking a shower in the room upstairs. Even if he hadn't done anything yet, the moment the two women met, there would be no explaining it. All away. Don't try to stop me. I'm going up there. that the faster Wanda walked, the more her heart ached, and her voice grew choked and hoarse. She was fighting back tears. This was her first time, the first time she'd liked someone this much. It hadn't been long, but her feelings were real. She reached the door, a familiar scent wafted over her, the perfume she recognized from a dinner date with Hood. She froze just outside the door. It was as if another world lay beyond it, and once it was opened, her whole world would be shattered. "Wanda, listen to me." Hood was behind her, his eyes filled with a mix of emotions. He didn't want this, but he had a lot of love to give, more than just one person. He'd planned to ease Wanda into the idea, but never imagined it would happen like this. Usually so clever, he was at a loss for what to do. Despite it all, he didn't stop Wanda from opening the door. He just sighed, feeling helpless. After a moment, Wanda seemed to find her resolve. She reached out her hand and grabbed the oak doorknob. With a sharp twist, she gritted her teeth and yanked the door open. The room came into view. The elegant room was perfectly tidy, full of life, and empty. The comforter lay neatly folded on the bed. Everything looked normal. Seeing the orderly room, Hood finally breathed a sigh of relief. Thank God Gwen hadn't left her clothes lying around. That would have been a disaster. However, the bathroom light was on. Wanda's eyelids drooped, and her eyes went dim. She felt a sharp pain in her heart and dully shifted her gaze to the frosted bathroom door. Steam obscured the other side, clearly indicating someone was showering. Her lipstick-covered lips went pale. The steam. After a long pause, Wanda managed to squeeze out the words. She felt like she'd spent all her strength just saying them. She was lost and didn't know where to turn. Even breathing felt difficult. Her chest tightened, and she instinctively took a deep breath. The bloodshot in her eyes revealed that she was far from calm. Hood took her cold hand, meeting her gaze, but Wanda wouldn't look at him. Slowly, she set the shopping bag down outside the door and turned to leave, her steps quickening. Who was she, anyway? Did spending a night together mean they were a thing? She and Hood hadn't even defined their relationship. Girlfriend? She'd never said that. Their relationship was probably the most ambiguous kind, though she hated to admit it. What could she do? She'd been the one who initiated things. Maybe Hood already had a girlfriend, and she was the other woman. She'd been so presumptuous. What was she, really? Even though their hearts were entwined, she couldn't accept this. Who Hood was with was his business. It was his choice. Wanda, that a warm embrace suddenly enveloped her. The warmth and fragrance from behind felt so comforting, but she was still hurting, and a hug couldn't fix that. I get it. Wanda shook her head, her voice hoarse. She didn't want to cry or show her vulnerable side, but she had to admit, when Hood hugged her, she hesitated, because if she walked away, it would truly be over. But could she really accept it? "What are you doing?" Just as Wanda was lost in thought, she felt Hood scoop her up into his arms. "Since you can't wait, let's go." That he carried her toward the bathroom. You wouldn't dare." That Wanda's mind blanked. One thought dominated her. Hood was planning to bring her right in with him. If so, it would be. As she was thinking this, Hood kicked the bathroom door open. A cloud of steam hit her face, and Wanda nervously squeezed her eyes shut. Hood was being so bold, carrying her right in. But maybe it's for the best, that if there were 3 of them, maybe one more person would make the work easier. "Don't you want to join us? Open your eyes." Hood leaned close to Wanda's ear, burying his head in her hair and breathing against her skin. The tickling sensation made Wanda shrink back. She took a deep breath, opening her eyes with trembling lashes. Since she'd mentally prepared herself, she'd braced herself to see the worst, but when she opened her eyes, she froze. The bathroom was empty except for the hazy steam. Nobody. She was stunned. How could no one be there? It was nothing like she had imagined. Shouldn't there have been another girl? "Why are you so nervous?" That Hood whispered. "I came back from the rain and was about to take a shower, and you showed up. I had to open the door for you right away." Wanda's heart melted, her eyes filled with tenderness. He cared about her so much. Even though they weren't officially together, Hood had rushed to open the door for her, and now, she wanted to turn around and run. "Since you want to be together so much, let's be together. I know you're all decent people here and don't need the details." To save you money, I'll skip it. A long time later, afterward, Hood carried the limp Wanda out and gently set her down. You need to work out more, you're still too weak, he said with a smile, kissing her forehead. Wanda quickly crossed her arms over her chest, trying to hide from his gaze, but the more she did, the more alluring she looked, making Hood's eyes burn brighter. Who says I'm weak? I work out all the time. Wanda objected. It's your fault, that every time, she felt like her body didn't belong to her, and her mind was mush. She was lost at sea, swept away by the tide, with no way to resist. But you said you wanted to make the sea surge, you even wanted to use magic. Hood moved closer, staring at her intently, his emotions washed over her, and she trembled, she was terrified, feeling like she was no longer in control. Shut up. Stop it, that even with the air conditioning on, Wanda felt flushed, it was like she had a fever, and her mind was hazy, and she had just said, don't go on, stop. How did she even come up with that? It was insane. Rest up. I'll get you some soup. After straightening Wanda out, Hood covered her with a blanket. Okay. Wanda felt tired and leaned back against the pillow, closing her eyes. Hood tiptoed out of the room, his heart finally felt at ease, to cover his tracks. He'd even used the bull spell. When someone was exhausted enough, they wouldn't have the energy to think about anything else, and judging by the way things were going, Wanda would be asleep soon. How did he know? It was common sense. Time to check on the other side. Hood sighed and drew a circle in the air. A dimensional gate appeared, shimmering with light. On the other side was another room. Judging by the decorations, it was about the same size as the first, however, it was devoid of any personal belongings. When Hood stepped through the gate, he saw Gwen lying on the bed, wrapped in a quilt. She was watching the 85-inch TV on the wall. How did I end up here? Gwen had just finished showering, and before she could get dressed, a strange portal appeared. She was about to put on her battle suit to see what was going on when the door closed. But the scenery around her showed that she was still in Hood's house. We had guests, so I moved you to a nicer room. Hood explained without blushing. After all, what could such a small thing stump a seasoned lover? He had suddenly come up with an idea and teleported Gwen to the guest room downstairs. I was wondering what all the banging was upstairs. Gwen shrugged. It was normal for someone like Hood to be working late. Cough, cough. Hood cleared his throat, his expression a little awkward. Are there any clothes? Gwen peeked out from under the covers, revealing her bare shoulders. She had been waiting for clothes, so she just took a long bath and hid in bed. I'll get them. Hood opened the portal and grabbed some clothes from a clothing store. There was no time to go shopping now. Thanks. Gwen looked at the clothes and was surprised because they were all her size, but seeing Hood still standing there, she shyly said, could you turn around? Yeah. Hood turned around obediently, but at that moment, his eyes caught a stainless steel decoration on the wall. He could clearly see the room behind him. Imelda deserves a raise, Hood thought. The polishing was truly top-notch. Gwen didn't notice the details. Thanks, this dress fits perfectly. Gwen was pleasantly surprised. The dress was exactly her style, plus, the size was right, and she knew Hood had put in the effort. Meanwhile, upstairs, Wanda was getting sleepy while she was waiting. Hood, she called out, but there was no response. After a moment's hesitation, she wrapped herself in a towel and walked out. As soon as she opened the door, she felt the magic in the air. Her chaos magic was responding. Is there magic? Surprised, she reached out and touched the air. Buzz, star, the air vibrated. Someone had been casting a spell here. Chapter 45. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Is someone invading? Hod. Where are you? Wanda's face turned serious. The magical residue was too obvious. Could it be a black magician? The thought flashed through her mind. She hadn't forgotten the 3 bulls that had appeared in Manhattan. She held out her hands, crimson light flowing from them. She tried to pinpoint their approximate location using the magical traces in the air, even though she didn't know what was happening. If there was a fight, maybe she could help Hod. The crimson light swirled, and she felt a connection on the other side. Wanda. What are you doing out here? Hood came up the stairs, a silver tray in his hands. Seeing Wanda, he immediately understood, she was trying to find the other end of the dimensional portal. Where were you? I felt magical energy and thought something was wrong. Wanda looked at Hood and sighed in relief, he was important to her. Hood stayed calm and smiled, I just used a little magic to get back to you faster. Lying? He could lie without a flicker. Oh, okay. Wanda blinked her big, starry eyes, a warm feeling washing over her. She hadn't expected him to think of that, just to spend more time with her. How could she not be touched? Girls always notice the small things. Let's go back before the soup gets cold. Hood held the tray with one hand and took Wanda's hand with the other, leading her back to their room. He secretly breathed a sigh of relief that he'd been quick, or he wouldn't have had an explanation. Back in the room, Hood set the soup in front of Wanda. I was wondering why you teleported downstairs earlier. Wanda said casually, picking up her spoon. She had pinpointed the other end. It was on the first floor of the villa. Hood's face froze. I teleported to the first floor and realized the maid wasn't home, so I ran out to buy some. His heart raced a little. Wanda was too fast, he sighed inwardly. He needed to improve the shield tech. He hadn't thought she would even make it to the door. No wonder. That explains the extra magic I sensed. Wanda looked at the heavy rain outside, touched that he'd braved it for her. It's pouring. Don't bother next time. It's okay. I know magic. Hood smiled and squeezed her hand. This was a situation that could lead anywhere. Want to share? Wanda carefully scooped up a spoonful of the fragrant chicken soup, blew on it, and held it to Hood's mouth. Their relationship had deepened, and she wasn't as shy anymore. Sure. Hood leaned in and took a sip. Seeing his gentle expression, Wanda felt warm inside. This was the life she wanted, where they could be comfortable and loved. There was just one little problem, her legs still wouldn't stop shaking, but she thought of it as part of the experience. Wanda. Hood pulled his chair closer, his left arm wrapping around her waist. Can't we wait a bit? I haven't finished my soup. Wanda's eyes widened, the spoon trembling slightly in her hand. This was all so intense, but for some reason, she was hooked, wanting more. Okay, you finish your soup. I'll go downstairs and get ready. We haven't finished the last challenge yet. Hood winked, then stood and left the room. Wanda watched him go, a thought suddenly striking her. If she remembered right, she'd agreed to some strange game with Hood while rambling. Her cheeks flushed, and she looked down, quickly returning to her soup. If that's what he wanted, she'd play along. Once Hood closed the door, he didn't use the portal again. Instead, he headed to the kitchen on the first floor. In the warming area, 7 or 8 bowls of warm chicken soup sat waiting. Each was an extremely nourishing brew. I'm so smart. Hood couldn't help but praise himself. His work was often hectic, so he'd asked Imelda to prepare extra chicken soup every day and keep it warm. Go out and buy it? No way. There wasn't time. He grabbed a bowl of soup, put it on a tray, opened the portal, and stepped into the guest room. Gwen sat patiently on the bed. Seeing the familiar golden light, she smiled. You're back. Gwen looked at the chicken soup, her eyes welling up. You really went out to buy chicken soup? Even though she'd turned him down, he'd still gone and bought a bowl. She couldn't help but be moved. She hadn't felt such care in a long time. Hey, it's no big deal. Hood smiled, reaching out to pinch Gwen's cheek. Some chicken soup after getting caught in the rain is good for you. Gwen leaned in, letting Hood do as he pleased. It is a big deal, to me. You're great. Gwen looked at him seriously. She didn't know what love was like for others, but she felt it clearly now. Here. Drink your soup first. Hood let go of her cheek and placed the tray on the table. You should have some, too. As Hood put down the soup, Gwen grabbed his hand. Her eyes held an indescribable feeling. It was a girl's purest love. Okay. Hood sat down and nodded with a smile. The next second, Gwen sat directly on his lap, like a cute kitten. I'll feed you. Gwen's face was red, but she held her ground. She'd looked up why men carried guns and knew exactly what was happening, but she still shook it. This girl, Hood thought to himself, it was a crime. After they'd finished the soup, Hood picked Gwen up and put her on the bed. It's getting late. You should get some sleep. He'd considered taking her home, but it was too late to just send her off, and he felt a strange excitement. He decided to let Gwen stay in the guest room. Huh, Gwen was surprised. What about you? The reason she'd been so forward was that her parents weren't home. She was prepared for something to happen, but Hood was leaving. She felt a little disappointed. She was already on board. Be good. I have $1 billion deal to discuss, so I can't. Hood rubbed her hair and said, I'll make you a killer breakfast in the morning, though. He'd thought about doing something tonight, but with Wanda around, it was too complicated. He'd have to postpone. You can't solve a thing like this in 20 or 30 minutes, it's like a reader's stamina, it takes at least 2 or 3 hours. While he could summon a clone, that was just stupid. To read an exciting novel, just go to Falun Novel Network. To put a hat on yourself? That would be the dumbest move ever. Okay. Business is important. Gwen nodded, understanding. $1 billion project needed serious attention, that must be why Hood had disappeared for so long. She nodded, disappointed. When Hood opened the door to the master bedroom, Wanda was stretching and yawning. Where did you run off to? Wanda asked in a spoiled tone when she saw Hood. She'd been waiting for over 20 minutes and was getting sleepy, but she wanted to wait for Hood. These were hard to pick out. Games are like this, the more props, the better, Hood said with a sly smile, taking things out of the bag. There were various cosplay outfits, balls attached to belts, soft braids, and more. The socks were even more diverse. It was overwhelming. You. What are you going to do? Wanda's eyes widened. She knew she had to prepare, but not this much. It was enough to overload her senses. It shook her to her core. She didn't even know what some of these things were for. She knew Hood's hobbies were out there, but this was too much. This wasn't a game normal people played. No, Wanda shook her head, scared. It filled her with fear. Faced with this complicated mess, she didn't know how Hood planned to survive. Since you're lost, I'll help you. Hood pulled out a half-length cotton backless dress, smirking. Wanda's eyes widened when she saw it. I don't want that one. The color's ugly. She scrambled for an excuse. It was too embarrassing. Just imagining it made her cringe. She definitely wouldn't wear it. No way. I'll choose myself. Wanda scrambled through the pile of clothes, not giving Hood a chance. She paused, pulling out a white ghost spider suit. It was damp. She looked at it, shocked. What's going on? Wanda held it up, looking at Hood, confused. She never thought the ghost spider suit would be in here. Hood was just as surprised. He hadn't realized Gwen's suit was in the pile. I bought it at a store. I figured you could use it for cosplay. After all, she's a hero. It's probably wet from the rain. Hood reached for the suit. If you don't like it, forget it. He was flustered. He'd mixed things up. Wait. I want to wear this one. Wanda grabbed it back. It was the most covered up of the lot. Hood was stunned. Oh my God, she was going to wear Pinra's clothes. This was really exciting. Besides, didn't you say Ghost Spider has a great figure? Wanda pouted, unconvinced. She remembered when they were driving, Hood was fixated on the poster. Since they had a costume, they could compare themselves. That's fine, too. Hood was excited. He was actually going to see her in those clothes. Wait. Wanda leaned on the bed, about to head to the bathroom with the suit. Little witch, shouldn't we have been honest a long time ago? Hood looked at Wanda's legs, propping himself up on his hands and teasing her. Get out of the way. Wanda hurried into the bathroom, afraid Hood would do something weird. A few minutes later, Wanda came out. The zipper of the ghost spider suit looked ready to burst. Even the Somali trench couldn't stop it. Is it too small? Did you buy the wrong size? Wanda felt awkward. No. It's perfect. Too perfect. Hood rushed forward and hugged Wanda, eyes shining. It made sense. It was Gwen's combat uniform. and he was realizing the difference. It was so pronounced, the clothes might explode. The tight clothes accentuated Wanda. It was also a spiritual rush, hard to describe, but thought the southern hemisphere would explode. It was too exciting. Are you sure? Seeing Hood's excitement, Wanda was secretly pleased. Did this mean she'd beaten the ghost spider? Swish. Wanda felt something give. The zipper slid down from the pressure. It seems my little witch is more powerful than I thought. Hood was burning with desire and he couldn't hold back anymore. Don't come any closer. Wanda realized the danger. Hood's eyes were like a hungry wolf seeing fresh meat. The next second, she was thrown onto the bed, the headboard slammed against the wall. Creak. They instantly became bed-quality inspectors, downstairs. What is Mr. Hood doing? Gwen was on the bed, bored, watching TV. Crunch. What was that? She looked up, confused. It's so loud. What important business is Mr. Hood discussing? It's so noisy. Gwen's curiosity piqued. This was a billion-dollar project. She wanted to take a peek, and... Chapter 46. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Forget it, going up there would probably just mess things up. After a long hesitation, Gwen fought back her curiosity. If she interrupted something important, she wouldn't even know how to apologize. After all, this wasn't chump change, it was serious money. She couldn't fix it even if she offered herself, so, in the end, she decided not to bother them. Man, they're making a racket up there. It sounds intense. Listening to the creaking upstairs, Gwen thought, doing business is tough. Even someone as together as Hood must be putting in serious work. Burning the midnight oil like this is way more than most people are willing to do, even if they're shaking the table. It's gotta be from excitement. She could practically pinpoint where the noise was coming from. It's gotta be a furniture deal. Gwen pictured Hood and his partners putting furniture through its paces. That was the only thing that made sense, testing a table and a bed at the same time, then a chair. It had to be furniture, and judging by the sounds, they were really giving it their all, practically panting with effort. After who knows how long, Gwen finally drifted off to sleep. The next morning, Gwen was dead to the world, sleeping like a log. She hadn't slept that well in ages, even without Hood next to her, but knowing he was upstairs gave her a sense of security. She was even drooling a little, a happy smile on her face. Knock, knock, knock. Someone was at the door. Gwen stumbled out of bed, shuffled over, and opened the door. It was Hood, standing outside 867. Mr. Hodder, what are you doing up so early? Gwen looked adorable, with her messy hair and sleepy eyes. Morning. You look rough, Hood said, noticing the dark circles under her eyes. Did you stay up late last night? What's with the bags? Yeah, I had a little insomnia. You guys were a bit loud discussing that project with the furniture people last night. Gwen blurted out, then quickly added, but it's cool. I know you had to nail down that deal. Furniture people. Hood was totally thrown. He hadn't slept all night and finally nailed it. Yeah. Aren't you dealing with a furniture company? I heard you testing furniture upstairs. Gwen nodded earnestly. She'd put a lot of thought into this. Who else would test furniture like that? Right. Hood realized the soundproofing was worse than he thought. I'll get you a better room next time. He just had to roll with it. He couldn't exactly tell Gwen what really went down upstairs. My room's fine. Gwen mumbled, sounding a little bummed. If she could cuddle her bear like she usually did, she would have slept like a baby. What was that? That even the ever-alert Hood was a little out of it after his all-nighter and didn't catch it. Nothing. Gwen blushed and shook her head. She mentally smacked herself. She always said what she was thinking. I'm gonna go wash up. Then we can grab breakfast together. Gwen moved closer and gently tugged at his sleeve. Even after just one night, she wanted to be around him all the time. She was worried he'd be busy with business again. If he had to go out, she didn't know what she'd do. I already made it. Hood smiled and ruffled her hair. He'd burned all his energy last night. With his power, Wanda was out cold and wouldn't be waking up anytime soon, so he took the opportunity to whip up breakfast. Really? Gwen's eyes widened. She figured he'd be too busy, especially after working late with those guys. How did he find the time? Yep. Go get cleaned up, Hood grinned. Okay, Gwen bounced up, excited. She couldn't believe he cared so much. She knew a big shot like Hood's time was money. In the dining room, the marble table was covered with at least a dozen dishes, and they all smelled amazing. The whole place was filled with different aromas. Wow! You made all this? Gwen's eyes scanned the dishes. She couldn't help but hug and kiss Hood. She never expected he could actually cook this well. It looked better than that fancy restaurant they went to last time. Come on, sit down. Hood pulled out a chair for her. It's got different breakfasts from all over the world. For him, cooking a feast was no big deal, especially with magic. He could juggle multiple pots at once, he could chop veggies and knead dough at the same time. Gwen was even more touched by Hood's manners. Little things like that meant the world to her. Even something subconscious showed that he was a true gentleman. She was already head over heels, and this just cranked it up to 11. She knew Hood was amazing, but this blew her mind. This little bun is so good. The crispy sticks are great. Is this milky soy milk? Gwen tried everything on the table. Every bite was a party in her mouth. Any woman who ends up with you will be forever stuffed. Gwen rubbed her full stomach, sounding jealous. You hardly ever see guys cooking breakfast. Most guys just grab cereal or a sandwich. This was the first time she'd had anything like this. When you're with me, I'll take care of more than just your stomach. Hood chuckled, thinking to himself, breakfast is just the beginning. That the two of them had an amazing morning. Gwen ate every last bite. Even though she was stuffed, she smiled and said, I'm coming here every day from now on. As long as you like, I can cook for you every day. Hood glanced at his watch. Do you have classes today? Crap. I'm gonna be late. Gwen looked at the clock and nearly jumped out of her skin. It's almost 8. She didn't have to report, but she was a total goody two-shoes, a model student. She only ditched class if there was some major emergency the cops couldn't handle. Relax, I'll get you there quick. Hood grinned. Since he had the dimensional door, everything was a breeze. Shoot, where's my uniform? Gwen suddenly remembered. After she changed yesterday, she asked Hood to wash it. Oh, your suit, hang on a sec. Hood grimaced, looking awkward. He hurried upstairs and came back down with Gwen's ghost spider suit. Huh? Gwen's eyes widened. What happened? There was a huge tear where the legs connected on the spirit spider suit. Hood hesitated for a long time. I think the washing machine was too powerful. He wasn't thinking about the details when they were getting busy yesterday, so after a full night, the suit was like this. Okay. Gwen pouted and took it, but then she sniffed. Something's off with the suit. Off? Hood's face turned weird. He didn't actually wash the clothes, they dried because of Wanda's body heat, so if there was a smell. Mr. Hodder, I didn't know your detergent smelled like heather. Gwen figured it out. That's kind of a niche scent. She didn't know if that was a rich people thing. Oh, I'll try a different one next time. Hood looked embarrassed. No need. Gwen sniffed again, smiling playfully. But it's okay. It's a new experience. Hood sighed. If you don't like the smell, wash it again when you get back. Just then, Gwen saw the clock. Oh no, I'm gonna be late. Knock, knock, knock. You go to class. I'll swing by later if I get the chance. Hood heard noise from upstairs and waved his right hand. With a flash of gold, the dimensional door appeared in front of Gwen. Okay, see ya. Gwen grinned, nodded, and stepped into the portal. She turned around and waved goodbye to Hood. Phew. As the dimensional door vanished, Hood finally relaxed. Hod, what smells so good? Wanda leaned on the banister and staggered down the stairs. It was the best smell she'd ever smelled. I just made breakfast a little while ago. Hood turned around, straightened his clothes, and grinned. Breakfast? Wanda was surprised. She never expected Hood to cook. He'd never mentioned it before. she figured a rich guy like Hood would be like Tony. Yeah, I made it just for you. Hood puffed out his chest. Ow! Wanda suddenly winced and hissed. What's wrong? Hood rushed to help her. He noticed her shuffling gait. You know what's wrong. This is all your fault. Wanda bit her lip and playfully punched his arm. She didn't know what was up with Hood last night. He was so amped up, he just wore her ghost spider suit, but it seemed that it was Hood who increased his combat power. She didn't breathe properly for the whole night. She woke up sore. Your body's still too weak. You can't handle me at my best. Hood smirked, wrapping his arms around her. He carefully guided her downstairs. His fighting power was insane. Who can handle you? You're a total animal. Wanda rolled her eyes. She was way stronger than a normal person. Now he's saying she's out of shape. Please. You can definitely do it, and I will give you a good rest when the time comes. Hood smirked. Have you ever heard of cures like? Wanda remembered what he said at breakfast. No way. You're the worst. Wanda shook her head. With Hood's help, Wanda made it to the dining table. What's with the extra dishes? Wanda noticed the dirty tableware. It looked like someone just used it. Hood's head swam. He forgot to clean up Gwen's dishes. That's just the one I use to taste stuff when I'm cooking. He came up with that fast. Oh. Wanda grabbed the tableware. I'll get you a clean set. Hood tensed as Wanda picked up the fork. Nah, it's fine. I don't mind you using it anyway. Wanda waved her hand. She'd already gotten down and dirty with him, so who cared about a fork? Besides, Hood said it was for tasting food. She was so starving she could eat a horse. Okay, then. You can open a 5-star restaurant and be a chef in the future. Wanda tasted the food inside. It was way better than she expected. She'd eaten a lot of fancy stuff, but this was on another level. If you like it, eat up. Hood sat next to her. Why aren't you eating? Wanda frowned. I'm good. Hood grimaced. He and Gwen had been sharing bites, that's why there was only one bowl. He was already stuffed. No, you have to eat. Skipping breakfast is bad. Wanda grabbed a fried bun and shoved it at him. It'll just go to waste. Hood's face paled, but he took it and ate it. As time went by, Hood didn't stop until she felt the food was about to rise up her throat. After eating and drinking, Wanda leaned back in her chair, as if she suddenly remembered something. Oh yeah, Hod, where's the ghost spider suit? I didn't see it when I got up. Chapter 47. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Wanda brought up the battle suit because she wanted to wash it. It's a personal thing, after all, and she didn't want the maid handling it. What? You want to do that again? Hod asked, surprised. He hadn't expected her to mention it, especially since it was he who brought it back to Gwen's place. No. Wanda shook her head. She could barely stand, let alone think about that. But she had to admit, becoming Ghost Spider-Man was kind of fun. About that suit, I tossed it. But if you liked it, I can buy another, Hod said with a sly grin. Who liked it? Wanda squirmed in his arms. But the more she moved, the more she noticed Hod's gun digging into her. If you didn't like it, how would you even remember it? Hod teased, his eyes roaming over her. Wanda scrambled out of his embrace, feigning alarm. You're the one who liked it. Were you mistaking me for Ghost Spider yesterday? She knew that suit had sent Hod's fighting power through the roof. He practically wanted to tear her apart. That's ridiculous. Slander. Pure slander. Hod protested, not wanting to admit he'd been picturing Ghost Spider. He knew Gwen was downstairs, so his excitement was on another level. Hee. Wanda snorted, gently pushing his head with her finger. You were very happy last night. Really happy, right? What do you think? Hod replied, a smirk playing on his lips. If you keep this up, I'm not talking to you anymore. Wanda huffed, plopping down in a chair. Once or twice was whatever, but if he imagined her as Ghost Spider every time, what would she become? She wasn't some kind of substitute. Okay. Hod reassured her. I promise, no more Ghost Spider. I'll let it slide this time, Wanda conceded, seeing his sincere apology. But seriously, you need to work on your chaos magic, Hod said, rubbing her head, his expression turning serious. Chaos magic was dangerous, and if she didn't get it under control, she'd lose it one day. Her control had improved, but it wasn't nearly enough. Her power could warp reality, which was why he was so serious about it. Like you always say. Wanda had been practicing when she wasn't with him, but she wasn't seeing major progress. She couldn't manipulate reality the way Hod could during their training. Simply changing small objects was already a struggle. No, follow what's written in this book, Hod said, shaking his head and conjuring a leather-bound book from thin air. Wanda's eyes widened. How did you do that? She hadn't sensed any magic, the book seemed to appear from nowhere. A magician never reveals his secrets, Hod grinned. This is what you need to learn. What is it? What's written in it? Wanda frowned, staring at the text. She couldn't understand a single word. The language seemed alien. This is the Scroll of Scython, and it's a perfect fit for your chaos magic. Hod had only just acquired all the scrolls of Scython the day before. The complete scrolls were far more comprehensive than the Darkhold. The Darkhold was just a copy, missing large chunks of dark magic and necromancy. The two were vastly different, which was why the scrolls of Scython were so coveted by dark wizards. They saw it as the ultimate divine artifact, the source of all dark magic, but the version he was giving Wanda was one he'd modified himself. The original had too much dark magic, which wasn't good for her to practice. Scython's magic was intensely persuasive, subtly amplifying the practitioner's dark side. Overdoing it could even cause their soul to revert back to Scython. He wasn't worried about that, though. She had chaos magic, and besides, as long as he was around, he doubted Scython had a chance. The Scroll of Scython? Wanda had never heard of it. Even the writing gave off an unsettling, sinister vibe. Looking at the eerie symbols, she felt dizzy and drowsy. Don't worry, silly girl, I'll teach you, Hod said, not making fun of her. He sat next to her and spread the scroll on the table. He knew Wanda's past had been filled with hardship and barely getting by. The fact that she was even alive was a miracle, let alone learning magic. Besides, the Scroll of Scython was written in an ancient language that few could decipher. Even if dark wizards stole it, they couldn't learn anything quickly. Deciphering the language was a huge obstacle. Not everyone could master so many ancient languages. It was a challenge that would stump most people. You're such a dork. Wanda teased, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. Even though she didn't understand, Hod was taking the time to teach her. That alone touched her. She knew he was doing it for her own good, otherwise he wouldn't keep harping on chaos magic. Alright, repeat after me. He pointed to the lines of ancient script. This section explains the origin of the Scroll of Scython. And this paragraph? It was fabricated later, chronicling the deeds of the ancient god Scython. Hod explained, even though it wasn't directly related to magic, it was important to be aware of Scython and be wary of it. Black magic always had an influence from Scython. The more aware she was, the more cautious she'd be when using chaos magic. As he explained, Wanda gradually focused. Hod's explanations were detailed, and he rephrased things until she understood. Oh, I get it now. As time passed, Wanda's focus shifted. Her eyes wandered to Hod's handsome face. When he spoke, his voice had a unique magnetism that made her fall even harder. She hadn't even realized how deeply she'd fallen for him. The more you uncovered about someone, the easier it was to be drawn in. She was completely captivated by him. Every woman admired a strong man. Even though Wanda was powerful herself, she couldn't help but be attracted to Hod. This was the man who'd given her so many first experiences, after all. Little witch, what are you even reading? Hod noticed Wanda was distracted and gently flicked her forehead. What's so fascinating? Is there any actual knowledge in there? No, I was just thinking about something else, Wanda said, wincing and covering her forehead, giving him a pleading look. She knew what was important, but she couldn't control her feelings. Thinking about something else, huh? I know what you're thinking. Hod grabbed her cheeks and said through gritted teeth, if you don't pay attention, you'll be punished. He didn't want to have to fight Scython one day. This was all important to her, otherwise, he wouldn't have hand-picked these spells for her. I didn't mean to. I'm watching again. Wanda swatted his hand away and rubbed her cheeks, looking indignant. She quickly refocused on the book, but her mind kept wandering back to Hod. Sometimes, when you fell in love with someone, you couldn't help but think of them no matter what you did. She tried to control her emotions, but it wasn't working. He could cook, he was capable, handsome, and his strength was unfathomable. She still didn't know Hod's background. And more importantly, that waist seemed to be made of vibranium. It seemed to have endless power and energy. The more she thought about it, the more her mind became clouded. It felt like she was being filled up, but not with knowledge. It was something indescribable. Little witch, focus. Hod saw the dazed look in her eyes. He didn't know where she was looking at his body. Oh. Wanda snapped back to reality after Hod's stern warning. She quickly adjusted her posture and looked at the book. Wanda, remember, your greatest strength is chaos magic, Hod said seriously, meeting her gaze. So you have to maximize your advantage. Spells are just tools to help you, you should be practicing chaos magic, not just the scroll of Scython. Wanda looked thoughtful. She'd seen the power of her magic, but she didn't really understand it. She just knew it made her stronger. She'd mainly used external force to attack. If it weren't for Hod, she wouldn't even know how to manipulate things. Yes, if you can make your chaos magic stronger, that's real power. The Darkhold is just a tool to help. Hod knew that Wanda didn't realize how powerful she was. Chaos magic was one of the three ancient magics, there was no weak one. It was an extremely terrifying energy that could even tear apart Thanos. If she mastered it, breaking through the single universe was just a matter of time. Okay, I get it. Wanda nodded seriously. She was in awe of Hod's knowledge. He knew everything, like a walking encyclopedia. Nothing escaped his attention. He even understood her chaos magic better than she did. So you have to be serious. Of course, if you want to, I can reward you after you learn it. Hod smirked. You're so bad. Wanda playfully punched his arm, seeing his expression. Come on, let's keep reading. I'll teach you the text. Hod rubbed her head and began explaining the rest of the scroll, teaching her some simpler spells. With her comprehension, it wasn't a problem. She picked it up after only a few tries. Wanda, sitting cross-legged in the chair, slowly opened her eyes, pupils flashing scarlet. A crimson light enveloped her skin, making her even more alluring. She silently chanted the spell, reaching for a bonsai. Whoosh! A scarlet light flashed. Buzz! The flowers were instantly wrapped in the red light, growing rapidly. The bonsai became twisted and grotesque, spreading like a vine. In moments it was covered in black barbs, the plant turning dark black. The vines also bound the other bonsai, the barbs seemingly alive, eroding their vitality. Excellent, you learned it. Hod applauded. That's because you taught me so well. Wanda hugged him, gently brushing her lips against his cheek. This is your reward. That's not enough, Hod said, tapping her lips with his finger. And you kissed the wrong place. No. I'm tired. Wanda knew what he wanted. What do you think we should do? Hod could tell she had something in mind. I want to go out with you tonight, Wanda whispered in his ear. Come back tonight, and I'll have a big surprise for you. What? Hod's ear tingled. He wanted to kiss her now, but he had to endure it for tonight. He pinched her cheek. You promised you wouldn't lie. I'm not lying. Wanda opened the scroll of Scython, looking at it seriously. I want to keep studying. Don't bother me. I'll be in the backyard. If you want me, come find me, Hod said, pinching her again. As Hod left, Wanda's mouth twitched. How could he say such shameless things? Chapter 48. You are listening at novelfull.audio. In the backyard of the mansion, Hood strolled onto the lawn. He glanced around. A high wall, easily 100 feet tall, surrounded the property. The 50-acre backyard was so big, you could drive around in it. The place screamed luxury, easily topping anything else in New York. It had everything: a swimming pool, a football field, a basketball court, and even a golf course. Off to the side, a special parking area kept the backyard pristine. A massive stone sculpture of a rearing horse dominated the center. Frozen mid-roar. Originally, the wall had been maybe 15 feet high, but after he got some sweet system rewards, he had it jacked up to 100. It was 20 feet thick, easy. Even a direct hit from artillery wouldn't scratch it. If Wanda's grinding this hard, I should mess around with my powers too. Hood stretched and yawned. He'd been putting in work at the gym, so he hadn't played around with his abilities in a minute. Perfect opportunity, while Wanda was hitting the books. He hadn't even looked at the last reward he'd snagged. Time to see what it did. He looked up at the big sky and the fancy scenery and felt a little spark of joy. Power of the fire element. That he said it under his breath, and boom, system panel popped up in front of his face. Power of the fire element gives the user insane control over fire. The deeper the mastery, the stronger the control. That's a win. That he couldn't help but be stoked. Beating that barbarian bull really paid off. The god-tier magic talent made learning magic a breeze, and now he had the power of the fire element. He could sling fire like nobody's business. It wasn't Phoenix Force level, but it was one of the natural elements, after all. It would be handy in a fight. Snap. Hood raised his right hand and snapped his fingers. A tiny flame, like a snake made of fire, danced on his index finger. It writhed and curled around his finger. A fiery little buddy. He just thought about it, and the flame flicked its tongue, like a mini fire dragon. The level of control was nuts. It seemed minor, but in a fight, the little things make all the difference. Fire Lotus, Hood muttered, then opened his palm. The little flame exploded, blossoming into a realistic fire lotus on his hand. With another thought, the lotus pulsed, shrinking into a tiny fireball, no bigger than a fingernail. He was compressing all that fire into a tiny package. It looked small, but it packed a punch. If he let it loose right now, it would hit like a cruise missile. Then, he clapped his hands together, and the fireball floated in the air, spelling out words as it dissipated. A wave of heat washed over him. Even though it was floating in the air, it made the grass on the lawn bend, turn yellow, and start to shrivel. Blow, Hood just thought it, and the words exploded. The air around the flames warped from the sudden heat. The blast cooked the dry grass, and it started to burn. Gotta try this too. He thought it, and flames wrapped around his fists. But here's the thing, the flames didn't burn his clothes or hair. Around him, it was clear the flames didn't touch Hood. That's how precise his control was. If he wanted, he could make an attacker miss 1,000 times in a row. After messing around for a bit, Hood waved his hand, and the flames vanished. This fire thing was way more fun than he thought. He could turn it into anything, like, make flames shoot out of the ground at a specific spot. That would mess up most magicians, but his skill with fire was too low to make it on the fly. I'll grind this later. Hood shook his head. He wasn't going to play with fire all day. The reward was good, but it wasn't Phoenix Force level. Next up, time to mess with the Phoenix Force. He knew more about the Phoenix Force than Wanda knew about chaos magic, but he hadn't taken the time to really practice, relying on fights to learn. Phoenix Force. Hood looked at the backyard, his eyes glowing orange-red. He raised his hand, and a ball of pure energy shot from his fingertips. It was a dark red energy line, with visible energy jumping and sparking on it. Then, the energy went right into the ground. It spread like a virus, devouring everything. Hood could feel it. He could consume everything with this tiny bit of phoenix power. Boom. The clear blue sky turned dark and ominous, the sunshine vanished, and a gentle breeze turned into a crazy hurricane, just whistling wind, the sky filled with dark clouds, and purple lightning flashed, thunder booming across the world. It felt like the end of the world. The dark clouds were practically on top of him, the trees shook and creaked in the hurricane. Leaves flew off, countless leaves danced in the sky with the storm, the water in the pool churned and roared, like it was looking at something horrifying. The statues, fences, pool, basketball hoops, and trees changed in a seriously messed up way. They started to shatter, turning into gray-black dust that flew into the sky with the hurricane. Even the lawn wasn't safe. The ground cried out, and the lawn broke into millions of tiny pieces flying everywhere. Cracks appeared, like a giant had ripped the earth apart. Crack. Then, cracks spread out. The power of the phoenix swallowed the edges, the earth collapsed. The peaceful yard was now a giant sinkhole. Hood couldn't help but whistle. Is this what the phoenix force is about? Wiping everything off the map, Hood could feel that this energy was still building, still surging in his body. It wanted him to let loose. The power just wanted to destroy everything. If you want to destroy, let's do it. Hood opened his arms and looked up at the sky, grinning. The energy spread like crazy. Inside the house, Wanda, who was looking at the Sithorn scroll, felt a sudden chill. She could feel the terrifying power from the backyard. It made her spine tingle. Hotter. Wanda didn't think, grabbed the scroll and ran towards the backyard, but when she got there, she stopped. The scene was crazy, the sudden change in the world, the cracked earth, the roaring storm. It proved the power. There was no real movement, but a huge pit just appeared. It was like something had eaten a chunk out of the world. Even the underground rock looked smooth. Hood floated above the sinkhole, his arms were open, like a god come down from the sky. He only brought fear and despair. Hod, what's going on? Wanda looked at Hood, terrified. She was shocked by the energy. She thought her chaos magic was strong, but next to Hood, it was nothing. She knew that Hood's power was way stronger than when he fought those barbarian bulls. Maybe he had mastered the power, and held it back so he didn't cause any damage back then. That was even scarier. The stronger the power, the harder it was to control. It was like an adult chopping wood with a 10-pound axe, versus a kid. The grip on strength was different, and that's why this power was insane. Even worse, the power didn't stop. It spread like a desert, swallowing everything in its path. Trees and land crumbled to black powder. Nothing was safe from that power. The power hit the wall, and it crumbled to nothing. Hodder, are you gonna wreck the whole place? Wanda shouted, watching the house disappear. She was afraid to get close to Hood. He was the source. If she got too close, she didn't know if she would turn to dust. Hood didn't hear Wanda. He closed his eyes, enjoying the power. It was like a drug. He could become the strongest being in the world. How awesome! This is so awesome! Hood grinned. Even with his eyes closed, he could feel the annihilation of everything around him. He could make everything disappear with a thought. He could feel the power flowing. To practice control, Hood shot another stream of energy from his fingertips. Everything broke down faster. This guy, he doesn't even care about the house anymore. Wanda watched Hood from a distance, looking helpless. She could only wait. That power was surging and spreading. She couldn't stop it. Meanwhile, at Avengers HQ, Rod, aren't you tired of messing with that junk every day? Natasha lay on the sofa, her feet on the table. She held a handful of sunflower seeds. She was channeling Tony. She'd gotten into eating sunflower seeds to kill time. This is for scientific research. Rod carefully put together the weapons in front of him. Nobody knew what would pop up next. Beep, beep. Rod jumped, dropping the weapon he was building. He turned, annoyed, and saw that Tony's machine was flashing. What's with the noise? Rhodes rushed to the detector. When he saw the readout, his eyes narrowed. The energy levels were rising fast, faster and faster. The energy was rivaling a nuke. He wondered if someone had fired something at the U.S. How's that possible? This force is too strong. He widened his eyes, wondering if the machine was busted. Natasha, go get Tony. Rod yelled at Natasha, his eyes full of worry. If the machine was right, they were in trouble. This force was stronger than all of them combined. Natasha threw the seeds on the table and ran to Tony's office. What? It's still rising. Tony's face changed when he heard the news. He was confident in his tech, the machine had been a big help before. He ran to the lab. When the door opened, all the Avengers were there. Huge energy field detected. Tony looked at the display, looking serious. Since the machine was built, it had never seen anything like this. Tony, can you track the energy? Steve looked at Tony. Something serious was happening. They needed to rush to the location. Wait, Tony waved his hand, and a virtual keyboard appeared. He typed fast. Everyone watched the instrument. The panel searched, and found a large area. It was outside New York. That location. Tony's face changed again. What's wrong? Steve had never seen Tony this nervous. My friend's house is in that area. Tony said, sounding worried. That's where Hood lived. Chapter 49. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Hodder. Rhodes sounded surprised. It was the first time he'd seen Tony so on edge. He's a really good friend of mine. He might be in danger. Even though they'd only known each other for less than 6 months, Hodder had become Tony's best friend, someone he confided in and trusted for advice. The glowing area on the screen showed the location of Hodder's house. Friday, prep the jet. Tony ordered. If Hodder was in trouble, he needed to get there fast. Tony, hold on. We don't even know what's going on yet, Steve cautioned, frowning. Rushing in without a plan was a recipe for disaster. Plus, these energy fluctuations were the strongest they'd ever encountered. Even all of them together might not be enough. How can I not be anxious? He's my best friend. Tony shot back, veins throbbing in his forehead. He was practically shaking. Even if you rush over, you might be too late. Let's get some intel first, Natasha advised. With energy levels like this, Tony going alone wouldn't accomplish anything, and she couldn't bring herself to say it, but Hodder might already be gone. The energy field was huge, and it was spreading fast. I agree, Barton chimed in, arms crossed. Have you thought about the team? You can't gamble with everyone's lives, Sam said, stepping up to Tony and putting a hand on his shoulder. He understood Tony's feelings, but this wasn't the time to act impulsively. They needed to track the energy fluctuations and figure out what was happening, and whether S.H.I.E.L.D. needed to get involved. Wait, look. The data in that area is changing. Rhodes exclaimed, pointing to the upper right corner of the screen. Friday, run a full scan for any fluctuations and analyze everything. Tony ordered, his voice tight with barely contained anger. If Hodder was hurt, he'd make whoever did it pay. Boss, previous data was inaccurate. Friday announced, and the screen flickered. 817. The energy was moving east, away from Hodder's house. Okay, Steve, take a team to check it out, Tony said, relief washing over him. He handed the mission off to Steve. Captain America always liked to be on the front lines. All right, on it. Steve nodded, then Tony stopped him. Be careful. This might be a Hydra setup. Got it. Steve replied casually, ready to head out, then he paused, as if remembering something. Where's Wanda? Everyone else was accounted for, but Wanda was missing. She'd been acting strange lately, sneaking out without a word. It was like she was hiding something. I don't know, Natasha said, a knowing smirk on her face. I didn't see her yesterday afternoon, and she didn't come back to base last night. Could something have happened? Rhodes wondered, frowning. Wanda used to hate going out. She didn't come back last night? Steve asked, surprised. He knew Wanda was usually reserved and kept to herself. She avoided going out if she could, and if she did, she'd always come back quickly. She spent most of her time at the base. Lately, she'd been distant and withdrawn, not like herself at all. Don't worry about it. Everyone's got their own life, Natasha said with a shrug. She had a pretty good idea of what was going on. Sometimes, when Wanda came back, she'd sit on the sofa giggling to herself. That only meant one thing: she had a crush, and her cheeks had a rosy glow. If that wasn't love, what was? Yeah, let's not pry too much. Everyone deserves their privacy, Tony added, walking over to Steve and patting him on the shoulder. Hodder had taught him the importance of trusting his teammates. He believed Wanda would tell them when she was ready, all they had to do was be patient. "Tony," Steve said, giving him a strange look. "You didn't used to be like this." He remembered Tony's anger when Wanda kept things from them. He'd even slammed the door on his way out. Now, he didn't seem to care at all. It was unbelievable. "I'm not some old fogey who can't adapt," Tony said with a smirk, raising his eyebrows at Steve. "Okay, Steve, go take care of things," Natasha said, cutting in. "Wanda will tell us what's up when she's ready." She didn't want them meddling in Wanda's personal life. She'd finally started to come out of her shell. She didn't want them to ruin it for her. Boom. Thunder rolled, and dark clouds gathered overhead. Everywhere you looked was barren and desolate. The Phoenix Force was dissolving everything it touched with terrifying speed. Trees and grass disappeared in an instant, leaving behind only empty land. The once beautiful backyard was unrecognizable. From above, the sunken ground looked stark and unnatural. The contrast between vitality and lifelessness was shocking. This power seemed otherworldly, something only a god could wield. More and more dark particles were released, swirling in the air like a black tornado. Hodder floated in the eye of the storm, like a god in command of all living things. He was motionless despite the chaos around him. Even though the wind and dust obscured everything, Hodder was impossible to miss. He was glowing with a blood-red light, like a star in the dead of night. An aura of immense power radiated from him. The Red Queen's voice echoed in his ears. "Master, the Avengers have detected your presence. I've tampered with their readings." "Hodder, stop it!" Wanda cried out, flying into the air as the Phoenix Force closed in. She had no idea what was happening to him, but she couldn't believe what he was doing. She clutched her thin nightgown, the wind whipping at the hem, revealing her long, pale legs. She'd rushed out so fast that she was still in her pajamas. But her biggest worry was the house. If Hodder kept going, it would be destroyed. "Don't worry," Hodder said, glancing at the house calmly before turning to face the ruined landscape. Boom! He clasped his hands behind his back, and the Phoenix Force stopped expanding. Then, in the blink of an eye, everything around them began to rewind. The dark particles in the sky seemed to fall upwards, flying back to their original positions. It was like a black rain falling from the sky, and the moment it touched the ground, everything began to heal. Every time a piece of the Phoenix Force retreated, the land it had consumed returned to normal. It was as if an invisible hand was restoring what had been destroyed. Flowers, trees, houses, land, and walls all returned to their former glory. "Oh my God," Wanda breathed, stunned. She'd seen Hood manipulate his power before, but this was different. This was restoring everything that had been lost. It was a terrifying display of power. She never imagined that Hodder was capable of something like this. It shattered everything she thought she knew. She'd always believed that magic had its limits, affecting only a small area, but Hodder had proven her wrong. As long as you had control, you could change anything, no matter how vast. She could sense that he wasn't stopping because he was running out of energy. It was like he was bored. "You and I are the same," Hodder said, gently floating over to her and wrapping his arms around her waist. "We both have the power to create and destroy. Since the Phoenix Force could turn everything to dust, even to nothing, it could just as easily turn dust into water, and water into life. He'd simply restored everything. Of course, that required absolute control over the Phoenix Force. After obtaining the second Phoenix fragment, he had mastered the control, and his strength had reached a whole new level. This was no problem for him at all. It was just that he'd never used the Phoenix Force on such a grand scale before. Even he was surprised by what he'd been able to do. "Incredible. It's like a miracle," Wanda said, her voice hushed. It was like a dream, watching everything destroyed, and then brought back to life. It was an awesome display of power. She had a feeling that all the Avengers together wouldn't be able to stand against Hodder. "Pretty cool, huh?" Hodder said with a grin, pulling her closer. "Yeah," Wanda said, kissing him lightly. "That's for encouragement." Seeing his power excited her. He was the man she loved, and the stronger he was, the safer he'd be. "Just a kiss." "That's not enough," Hodder said, his tongue tracing her lips. Just like that, Wanda knew what he was thinking. Ever since that first time, he'd developed a certain enthusiasm. "No, you promised me tonight." You can't take it back. Wanda shook her head helplessly. Why did he always have to think that way? It was crude and perverted. What's so special about tonight, that he didn't understand why girls always wanted to go out? You'll see, Wanda said with a mysterious smile. Wait, Hodder said, eyes widening. Are you planning to go outside? Do you like it that way? You actually like. He was truly shocked. Could he have accidentally unlocked something during their last encounter? Ouch, before he could finish, Wanda pinched him hard. Can't you ever think about something else? And if you keep talking nonsense, I'm going to bite you to pieces. Have you finished reading the book? Hodder asked, quickly changing the subject when he saw her starting to get angry. It's right here, she said, waving the parchment in her hand. How can I concentrate on a book when you're making so much noise? That she thought he'd lost control, and that was the only way to explain the chaos. Since you haven't read it, let's save it for later, Hodder said, savoring the way she felt in his arms. We have to balance work and rest. Let's take a nap. You can't study all the time. You have to relax your mind and body. And he just happened to be in the mood. A nap? We just woke up. Wanda protested. It wasn't a nap at all. He was just going to make her study the principle and structure of the shield machine again. Before she could react, Hodder opened a dimensional portal. He swept her up in his arms and stepped into the bedroom. Meanwhile, in Hell's Kitchen, New York, inside a run-down apartment, the walls were covered in bizarre symbols. Just looking at them made your skin crawl. A faint white smoke hung in the air, and there was a hint of blood. Agatha, who was meditating in the middle of the living room, suddenly opened her eyes. The Phoenix Force. That guy is releasing the Phoenix Force. That shouldn't be possible. Someone who hasn't learned magic shouldn't be able to control the Phoenix Force so freely, unless he's incredibly gifted. But that was unlikely. Truly gifted mages were rare on Earth, even in Camartage. Finding a genius was rare. Oblivion. Agatha felt the power, and her eyes burned with greed. This was the power she'd give anything to possess. She slowly stood up, grasping the ground, and picked up the black rabbit. Mr. Scratch, it's time to return chaos magic and the Phoenix Force to their rightful owners. Chapter 50. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ding! You just had yourself a great nap. Reward, Transformers, Bumblebee. Hod snapped his eyes open. That familiar system notification rang in his head. Transformers Bumblebee. Seriously? I got Bumblebee. He never expected a reward like this. For ages, he dreamt of owning a Bumblebee. The car was just too damn cool. Looks, firepower, the whole package. Sure, it wasn't some flashy luxury ride, but Bumblebee was high on his list of gotta-haves. Transformers, Bumblebee, the dream ride of every guy. It's chilling in your garage now. Smooch. Hod pulled Wanda in for a big kiss. Ever since Wanda showed up, his rewards have been killer. Talk about hitting the jackpot. She was his good luck charm for sure. What's got you so hyped? Wanda noticed the goofy grin plastered across Hod's face. 1 second he was lying there all quiet, the next he couldn't stop smiling. Maybe she'd been smiling so much that he was just catching the vibes. Otherwise, she had no clue what was making him so damn happy. I just scored a new car. Let's take it for a spin. Now that he had Bumblebee, Hod was itching to try it out. He scooped Wanda up. First, we're hitting the showers, then we're outta here. Is it really that urgent? Wanda couldn't understand what kind of car could get a rich dude like Hod. This worked up dude could buy pretty much any car on the planet if he wanted. You'll see in a minute. Hod carried her off towards the bathroom. 2 hours later, a slightly wobbly Wanda followed Hod to the garage. Check it out, the yellow one. Hod excitedly pointed at the Volkswagen Beetle parked smack in the middle of the garage, then froze. Something wasn't right. A Beetle? Seriously? This is the car you're so excited about? Wanda covered her mouth, trying not to bust out laughing. The Volkswagen Beetle looked so out of place next to the other cool rides. He could probably buy 100 Beetles for the price of any other car in here. She watched Hod's shocked expression, and couldn't hold it back anymore. He looked like a kid who'd unwrapped a present only to find homework inside. No way. Hod's jaw dropped. If he remembered right, it was supposed to be a Chevrolet Camaro. Then it hit him, Bumblebee could scan other cars and morph into them. Didn't peg you for a vintage car kind of guy. Wanda patted Hod on the shoulder, still giggling. Who's laughing now? That the speakers inside the yellow Volkswagen Beetle suddenly blared, I'm so fast, you'll puke, that the voice switched between male and female, bouncing between different channels. It talks? Wanda was genuinely surprised. Someone put AI in a clunker like this, that she didn't expect anyone to install artificial intelligence in this beat-up car. After all, artificial intelligence is high-end technology. Of course it is not the current kind. For example, Tony's Friday, this kind of artificial intelligence is very difficult to develop, so similar technology is actually installed on this kind of car. It's not AI. Hod grinned. It's got a mind of its own. I might be old, but I'm not useless. Asterisk crack, crack, star. The yellow beetle began to morph, its metal skin rippling. It trembled, lifted off the ground, and unfolded into a towering robot, its yellow paint gleaming. Bumblebee stared down at Wanda. That's so awesome. It can turn into a robot. Wanda took a step back, eyes wide. The robot was way taller than she expected, and its head nearly smacked the ceiling. She never imagined the car could do this, and it looked damn cool in robot mode. Finally, she got why Hod was so excited. This kind of thing had a killer attraction for guys. Woman, you feelin' my vibe now? Bumblebee boasted, puffing out his chest. Even though the voice was kind of childish, his cocky attitude was obvious. Why does your voice keep changing? Wanda asked, confused. Something was off. His voice box is busted, so he can only talk through the radio. Hod remembered the original plot like it was yesterday. He'd watched the movie a million times, so now Bumblebee can only extract sounds from different radio stations to reply. Seriously? That's wild. Wanda's eyes lit up. That was even cooler, it could switch voices on the fly. Just like those cyborgs from sci-fi movies. Am I amazing or what? Way better than those junkers you were talking about. Bumblebee jiggled with excitement, soaking up the praise. He knew this was his master's lady, so he was putting on a show. Too bad. Wanda shook her head. The beetle look is still pretty lame. Hood was a dude with class. Cruising around in a beetle would be a bad look for him, even if he was trying to be low-key. This was a bit much. Hold up. Click. Bumblebee started changing again, his form rippling. The bulky armor plating began to shrink in seconds. He was a car again, but not a beetle. Now he was a Chevrolet Camaro. The classic black racing stripes ran from front to back. The sporty lines and slightly raised hood screamed attitude. The yellow paint job wasn't flashy, just bold. How the hell did it do that? Wanda stared in disbelief. She'd seen some crazy tech, and a car that turned into a robot and back didn't even faze her at this point, but morphing from a beetle into something else. That blew her mind. What did I tell you? I'm not some clunker. Bumblebee beeped, his doors swinging open. Hop in, I'll show you what I can do. Let's go for a cruise. Hod pulled Wanda into the car. Buckle up. We're going for a ride. The speakers blared, the engine roared, and the car shot forward. With a deafening roar, the yellow streak tore down the road. The speedometer climbed. In seconds, they were doing over 120 miles per hour. Holy crap, what was that? How did a Camaro just blow past my Lambo? The other driver's jaw dropped as he watched the taillights disappear. He was already pushing 110 miles per hour, and this thing made him look like he was standing still. Hod casually gripped the steering wheel with one hand. If he wasn't worried about looking like a show-off, he wouldn't even bother holding it. Bumblebee had a mind of his own and could drive just fine. This is insane. Wanda gripped the seatbelt. Flying through the air was one thing, but this was a whole different level. Adrenaline surged through her veins. I'm just getting started. Bumblebee's cocky voice boomed from the speakers. There's a turn coming up. Slow down. Wanda screamed. At this speed, they were gonna flip for sure. But Bumblebee didn't slow down. Instead, he sped up. Hod yanked the wheel hard, but didn't turn. Instead, they were headed straight for the side of the road. Wanda's face went white. If they crashed at this speed, they'd be toast. But Hod didn't even flinch. He stomped on the gas, click, the door nearest Hod transformed into a mechanical hand, slamming into the ground. Sparks flew as the car swerved into a perfect tail swing turn. They were back on the road, tearing off faster than ever. "Why are you driving like a maniac?" Wanda gasped, still shaking. She almost used chaos magic back there. "You scared me half to death." "Trust Bumblebee. He'd never let you get hurt." Hod grinned. He knew exactly what Bumblebee could do. Even if they were falling out of the sky, Bumblebee could change in mid-air and catch them. "Asshole." Wanda knew Hod wouldn't lie to her, but she was still freaked out. She slapped his arm. He'd totally done that on purpose to scare her. "Where are we going today?" Hod looked at Wanda, puzzled. She'd been acting all mysterious, and he was curious to know why. "We're going to Gwen Beach." Wanda smiled. There was a hint of excitement in her eyes. Gwen Beach? Hod was surprised. Hitting the beach in the fall wasn't the smartest move. It wasn't exactly swimming weather, and most of the shops along the shore would be closed. The only good thing was that there would be fewer crowds, which was good for couples. "Bumblebee, let's roll. Gwen Beach, here we come." Hod gave the order and let Bumblebee take over. Bumblebee had GPS and could drive a hell of a lot faster than him. "Roger that." Heading to Orchard Beach, a voice crackled over the speakers as they tore off into the distance. Orchard Beach was a famous spot in New York. When the car pulled up on the sand, Hod grabbed Wanda's hand and headed for the water. Looking at the waves, he had to admit, this place was popular for a reason. The weather was mild and sunny, the light blue sky covered the top of their heads like a lake, and seagulls were circling with cries. The fishy and salty sea breeze blew on the two of them, and a unique smell of the seaside came. Because of the weather, there were fewer people on the beach, but because it is a well-known tourist attraction, even if there are fewer people, there will be many, and most of them are couples, who come here to see the scenery. It's even better than the pictures. Under the palm trees, Wanda breathed deep, savoring the salty air. "You've never been here before." Hod looked at Wanda in confusion, thinking she'd picked the spot to bring him here. "Nope." Wanda looked wistful. "After coming to the United States, I was stuck in a lab or at the Avengers base. Too busy saving the world to have much fun. Plus, with her bad reputation, she didn't exactly feel like sneaking out on her days off. That's why she was so excited to finally see this beach with Hood." "Well, get ready to have some fun." Hod squeezed Wanda's hand, feeling a pang of sympathy. The witch's life was really messed up. If it wasn't for him, she might never have a normal life. After all, the Scarlet Witch's ending in the comics was a total tragedy. "I want to dip my toes in the water." Wanda gazed at the blue waves. "Let's do it. Although Gwen Beach is nice, there are too many people, so forget about swimming." He didn't feel like sharing his girl in a swimsuit with all these randos. If she really wanted to swim, he'd book a private spot for them. "Actually, Hod, I wanted to show you something." Wanda took a deep breath, like she'd made up her mind. "What's up?" Hod wondered if Wanda was finally about to spill the beans. She'd been acting weird all day, like she was holding something back. "Check this out." Wanda closed her eyes, trying to stay calm. She pulled a scarf from her pocket and held it out. A crimson light began to glow, and the scarf floated in the air. The blood-red fabric transformed, sprouting green branches on either side. A delicate red rose bloomed at the top. Hod's jaw dropped. What the hell? He never expected Wanda to give him flowers. Wanda inhaled and prepared to confess. She'd always wanted a real relationship with Hood, one where they could be honest with each other, but fear had always stopped her. But now, her heart was pounding. She looked at the rose clutched in her hands, ready to ask the big question. Boom, star. Suddenly, the sky went dark. A black line swept in from the horizon, engulfing the entire beach. A wave of terror washed over them. A heavy pressure filled the air. "Someone's coming." Hod silenced Wanda with a finger to her lips, telling her to be quiet. In the distance, lightning flashed and thunder rumbled. A strange figure appeared, her hooked nose cast a sinister shadow over her face. That terrifying smile had returned, and dark clouds filled the sky. The once blue ocean became choppy and dark, huge waves crashed towards the shore, and indescribable dark energy surged around them.